Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Black History, Black Stories. This is part of St. Louis County Library's celebration of Black History Month. And so we're so excited to have you with us. And we're going to be talking about books by African-American authors from a whole bunch of different genres, but all have a little bit of a tie in some way, a big tie to Black history. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. All right. So before we get started with the presentation, I just want to orient you to some of our Zoom features. So just so you know, tonight's program is in a webinar format, which means your camera and microphone are not active, so no one can see or hear you. But please feel free to enter questions for us in the chat box. I will turn that on a little bit later in the program, and we will have a Q&A at the end of our presentation. So you, once I turn on and open up that chat, you can put questions in there and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So tonight's presenters are Tammy from the Parkview branch, Yoli from Lewis and Clark, Erin from Rock Road, and Helena also from Parkview. So we're so glad to have them with us tonight, and they'll be talking about some really great titles. You can find those books in our catalog, either in print or e-media. So you can find them in the catalog on Hoopla or Overdrive or the LADEE app. I did send out a handout to anyone that signed up like before 1 o'clock today or so. So I sent that out to everyone who registered before 1 o'clock, so you can follow along if you like. And that PDF does have clickable links in it. So if you click on the covers, it'll take you to the catalog. If you didn't get that handout, no worries. I'm going to be sending a follow-up email to this program in a couple of days. Once the recording of this program is up on YouTube, I will send out a link to the recording, and it'll have the handout attached to it as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tammy, and she will get us started with her picks. Take it away, Tammy.
Good evening, everyone. My first book is Nights Wherever We Go by Tracy Rose Payton. It is her debut novel. This novel takes place in Texas during slavery. The plantation owners, the Lucys, who are named after Lucifer himself, which I think is genius the way the author does that. Their plantation is struggling, and they have sent 6 women to help their struggling plantation by bearing children. The Lucys hire a stockman supposed to impregnate the women. There is a catch. Nan, a midwife and medicine woman, gives cotton root to chew on as to prevent this. In the midst of all this, the women build up a bond that will never be broken. Let me read an excerpt. One by one, out of the cabin and around the corner, and farther still, past the Lucy's property line. There were 6 trudging single file into the forest. Junie led the way. Patience, Lulu, Al, while Nan, the eldest, brought up the rear. We slipped deeper into the groves. The large oaks and elms skimmed out of their bark in various stages of atrophy. As progresses, we learned about the women. Some of them have children. They vary. One falls in love, and each one is contributes to the group in some way, which makes for a story that is heartbreaking and haunting. I love this book. It is beautifully written. The story immediately draws you in from the first page. This is my favorite book of the year so far. I listened to Tracy Rose Payton's book on the Poured Over Double Shot podcast with Mima Messner, who said the book twice. It's worth a listen. The podcast is worth a listen. I gathered more insight on the book when I listened to this with the author. The next book is In the Face of the Sun by Denny S. Bryce. This is her second book. Her first book was Wild Women and the Blues. When we read about African Americans migrating to the North from the South, we often don't hear about them going out West. This book tells some of their story. This book is told in what is called a dual timeline, told in the voices of Frankie and Daisy in 2 time periods, 1928 Los Angeles and 1960 Chicago. In 1928, in the City of Angels, Daisy is working at Hotel Somerville, the elite hotel for African Americans. She longs to be a journalist and shares gossip to Harry Belmont, who's a fellow journalist. As the story progresses, we learn that Daisy and her sister Henrietta, who also works at the hotel, are dealing with a lot of external things. They're dealing with the sickness of their mother. Their father wants them to be successful, and they are dealing with Black Hollywood. And all of that with the glitz, glamour, and betrayal. It's 1968. Frankie is running from her abusive husband, and she's pregnant, on her way to LA to stay. Her aunt agrees to drive her to LA in her Mustang, as long as she can stop along the way and handle some unfinished business. As the story moves on, relationships are challenged and a mystery is solved. If you like dual stories, have lots of characters and historical fiction, then this another movement man, father and son, and the legacy of a freedom ride by David Dennis. This is the Steph Curry Book Club choice and a Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance bestseller. It's part history, part memoir, and it's written by David Dennis Jr. is a senior writer at ANSI and a Black-led media platform, also an American Mosaic Journalism Prize recipient. Jr. combines the oral history who kept the story of his civil rights work mostly hidden, and David Jr. combines it with his own story from his work with the Black Lives Matter movement. It turns into a great story. In this book, we learn David Sr.'s life in the civil rights movement, his tenacity, and his fight for the civil rights of African Americans. In one scene in particular, David Dennis Sir was eating in a restaurant later on, an older couple staring at him in the local restaurant. As he was, man said, "Don't you remember us?" Said, "No, I don't." The older gentleman said, "My wife and I hid you in the trunk of our car so you could cross the state line into Louisiana." He was floored. This book felt familiar to me. My grandfather was the head of the NAACP in a small town in Mississippi and he often was reluctant to tell his story, the same way Mr. Dennis was. I'm so glad that David Dennis Sr. told his story and had his son write about it. This seems to have strengthened their bond, which is very evident in this book. Anywhere You Want Run by Wanda Mars. Oh, if you want to ride shotgun and no Chevy, then hop in because this book is for you. Your name is Violet because your mother loved flowers. You are running for your life in hotbed Jackson, Mississippi in 1964 during the height of the civil rights movement. You kill a white man who tried to assault you. And now what are you going to do? Or maybe your name is Marigold. You're Violet's sister, and your dreams of going to law school are dashed by a smooth-talking, good-looking young lawyer from New York who is working with you on the voting rights through the Mississippi Summer Project. You tell him you're pregnant, and he leaves on the next train smoking. So if you're a Violet, your boyfriend, who happens to be white, helps you escape. But because of the climate of America at this time, you end up in small Chillicothe, Georgia, hiding out until the smoke clears. If you're Marigold, you go all the way to Ohio with your high school sweetheart who thinks you are carrying his child. As the story unfolds, Violet finds her way in Chillicothe, and Marigold experiences poverty, domestic violence, and she soon realizes that someone is stalking her. Whether you're Violet or Marigold, you are in for a ride. This book is full of twists and turns. I read this book in 2 days. New York Times called it one of the best crime novels of the year in 2022. Twice is hard. Stories of Black women who fought to become physicians from the Civil War to the 21st century by Jasmine Brown. In this book, Jasmine Brown, who is a medical student, who, by the way, received her undergraduate degree from Washington University, gives us a wonderful, in-depth history of some of the Black women who, through unbelievable odds, became physicians. We learn of Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, who was the first African-American woman to earn a medical degree a year after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln. One story in this book that is familiar to me is that of Dr. May Chin. I first read about Dr. Chin in Angel of Harlem by Kawana Housley. Dr. Chin started college as a music major, but after writing a paper on bacteriology, a professor encouraged Dr. Chin to look into medical school. Dr. Chin was accepted to NYU Medical School as one of only 4 Black students, 3 of which were men. After graduation, Dr. Chin endured so much racial discrimination, oftentimes on call 24/7, many times as a servant to the white doctors. She was the only Black woman practicing doctor in Harlem for a long time. Also featured in this book is Dr. Joycelyn Elders, who became the first person in the state of Arkansas to become board certified in pediatric endocrinology and was the 15th Surgeon General of the United States. Dr. Elders graduated from high school at the age of 14. Being from a poor family, her family picked cotton to give her $3.43 for a bus ride to Philander Smith College, where the science classes and a chance meeting with Edith Irby Jones, an older medical student, changed the trajectory of her life. She then wanted to become a doctor. After graduating college and not being able to afford medical school, Dr. Elders joined the Army. After the Army, Dr. Elders returned to her home state of Arkansas and enrolled at the University of Arkansas College of Medicine. At that time, Dr. Elders was only 2 Black women to train at that school. I really enjoyed this book and I love the stories told, and I learned of some other Black women physicians that I didn't even know about. My upcoming pick that comes out tomorrow, February 28th, is Time's Undoing by Cheryl Head. Inspired by true events, Time's Undoing tells the story of Megan McKenzie, a young reporter with the Detroit Free Press, who is on a quest to find out what happened to her great-grandfather, Robert Harrington, who was killed in Birmingham, Alabama, and whose body was never found. She travels to Birmingham, and as she travels, the story unfolds. Will she uncover secrets? Will the townspeople trust her? Is she putting her life in danger? Read this story and find out. And next, slowly.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Hello, everyone. Tonight, the books I'll be discussing span genres. We have historical fiction, science fiction, and even a fictionalized biopic. I'm excited to share them with you all, and I hope that at least one of them sparks your interest, or you might even listen to me discuss an old favorite. My first book is Seeing Unburied Seeing by Jesmine Ward. In Seeing Unburied Seeing, Ward takes us on a journey using magical realism and the supernatural to craft a story of family and survival. The book is mainly told from the point of view of JoJo, a biracial 13-year-old boy raised in the Delta by his African-American maternal grandparents, as his parents, Leomi and Michael, battle substance abuse issues and incarceration. JoJo's grandfather, Pop Pop, is more like a father to him. When JoJo's father is released from prison, his mother decides to embark on a cross-state journey with JoJo and his younger sister Kayla to retrieve him. JoJo does not fully trust his parents and relies heavily on his grandfather and the Gree bag he gave him as he processes his parents and the recent loss of his grandmother. I chose this book because while it's fictional, it draws from the very real history of the Mississippi Delta and its legends about ghosts and magic. Parchman State Penitentiary, also known as Parchman Farm, is a real place and its own character in the book. Ward masterfully uses fiction to guide readers to ponder reality. My next book is Sula by Toni Morrison. What first drew me to Sula a decade ago, and in the times I've since reread it, is how each character feels like an individual while also representing an archetype and challenging us to explore what that means. In many ways, the town, ironically called The Bottom, is a character in and of itself. Through the town, we meet its inhabitants and learn how they are all connected. At the heart of the book is Sula's relationship with her on-again, off-again best friend, Nell, and how society's idea about who women should be and how they should behave affects their friendship. Sula's free spirit leads her to hurt Nell in a way that many would view as unforgivable. Morrison implores the reader to think about what we view as right and wrong and how we choose to live our own lives in relation to others. I chose this book because 5 decades on from its first publishing, Sula still feels contemporary and topical. I take something new from the book every time I read it, and there are so many topics to discuss. In The Bottom, there are no bad people, just people trying to make the best of the situation they have and conform to what will make life easier for them. And every time I read the book, I identify with a different character in a new way. My third book is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. An Unkindness of Ghosts is another book I found impossible to put down. The novel takes place 300 years into a future where Earth has been deemed inhabitable and humans exist in outer space aboard a ship called Matilda. However, even in an outer space set 300 years into the future, the book still feels almost like a futuristic look into the past. On the ship, the inhabitants are segregated based on race, with Black and brown people living on the lower decks existing in servitude, and white people living on the upper decks. At the center of the book is Aster, who lives on the lower decks but works as a healer, which allows her to move, rather uncomfortably, amongst the upper decks as well. Aster's mother committed suicide when she was a baby, and Aster's quest to understand more about herself and her mother sends her on a surprising and harrowing journey. I chose this book for many reasons. An Unkindness of Ghosts is fascinating for its expansive world building. Each character feels real, and each deck of the ship exists almost as its own self-contained country. I am also drawn to fictive narratives that tell us something about history, while connecting the past, present, and in this science fiction book, a distant future. Like Seeing Unburied Seeing, I found myself reading this book and connecting the dots to our very real history. My fourth book by Lady Hubbard is The Last Suspicious Holdout. In The Last Suspicious Holdout, Hubbard's collection of entwined short stories, I felt transported to a very real place. While reading the synopsis of the book, I was interested in the way she described the people and their circumstances. They reminded me of people and stories I'd heard of and met in my own life. In many ways, this novel and the stories within it embody the theme of this year's Black History Month panel. Through self-contained but also intertwined stories, Hubbard maps a history of the United States over 3 decades, chronicling how being newly upwardly mobile, the war on drugs, and culminating in what this means for a post-racial America shortly after Obama's election. Through stories of love, both romantic and familiar, of what it means to try to make it in a world after incarceration, and what our imaginations create when our reality is too bleak to bear, Hubbard wrote a book that I found vibrant and also heartbreaking. If you're a fan of slice of life stories, this would be a great book for you. And last but not least, probably one of my favorite books that I've read in the last 4 years is The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Ralton. In The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, Walton has created a cast of characters that feel so real, so familiar, that there were a few times I had to remind myself it was a work of fiction. The book is a fictional, historical, musical biopic. It tells the short-lived, meteoric rise of an interracial punk duo called Opal and Nev. Their fame stems from a tragic event wherein the narrator, a journalist writing an article about them, father is murdered in a race riot featuring the duo. That is all I can say without completely spoiling the book, and even that barely tells of the twists and turns in the novel. The novel seamlessly weaves real-life people, events, and musical artists of the past and present. There are interviews with Janelle Monáe, Henry Rollins, mentions of the Velvet Underground, Jimi Hendrix, the Rolling Stones, and countless others. I chose this book because while moments of it can be hard to read, it is an extremely interesting read. I also want to note, this is a book that I encourage you to listen to on audio, even if you usually do not. The book features a full cast, which only serves to make the book more fun and engaging to listen to. Finally, I am revisiting an earlier author to discuss a book I am looking forward to reading. Let Us Descend will be Jasmine Ward's first book since 2017's Sing, Unburied, Sing. According to the AP, it is the story of an enslaved teenage girl that the publisher is calling a blend of magical realism, historical narrative, and Dante's Inferno. I'm sure that Ward will broach the topic of slavery and all the horrors that come with it in a way that makes me stop and think, reread passages, and find myself wondering how this connects us to the world we live in today. I am excited for this book because I find Ward's work to be incredibly raw, human, and beautiful. In addition to Dante's Inferno, the synopsis also reminds me of a bit of The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates, another historical fiction book with elements of magical realism that I enjoyed and discussed in a previous Black History Month panel, which only makes me all the more excited. I hope that you all read it too, as it's published on October 3rd. All right, I'm now turning it over to Aaron.
Thank you so much, Yoli. I'm excited to get to talk to you about the books on my list. I'm Aaron. If you've dealt with me before, you know I lean toward fantasy and such, but I've got a bit of a variety this time, so I hope you'll appreciate what I've got. First book is Acacia Book 1, A War with the Maine by David Anthony Durham. This is set in the fictional empire of Acacia. And the book begins with Liadin Acheran, ruler of the known world, a widower and the father of 4 magnificent children who he dotes on. But no empire can be truly just. Before the emperor can make clear to his children the shameful history that secures their privilege, enemies of the empire begin an attack planned for long before the children were born. On his deathbed, the fallen king enacts a plan to spirit his children away in secret, hiding them around the world until they can grow strong enough to reclaim the throne and hopefully redeem the mistakes of the past. The book follows the Acheran children as they grow into a cunning diplomat, a master swordswoman, a notorious pirate, and a leader of men in a rich fantasy epic. The 4 children will eventually seek to reclaim their birthrights, avenge their father, and grapple with the evils that underpin their world. I think this is the kind of book you'll enjoy if you like complex historical fantasy or fantasy that plays with the idea of history. Those are kind of David Durham's bread and butter. He's written a whole bunch of things that are rooted in real life fantasy, but real life history, but take influences from fantasy and spin something new. This book and its series were sometimes called the African Game of Thrones. I think that's a bit of a disservice. That doesn't really let the books down on their own, but I can see why someone who enjoy the Song of Ice and Fire books may find something similar to enjoy here. They'll be warned there's less of the complicated familial, personal, and political intrigue at the heart of the story and more kind of big picture stuff. And the books focus on the themes of ugliness and the wickedness of empire and the responsibilities that people in power have to do something about it once they understand it. And even while it critiques empire, the book draws on rich histories of people from across Africa to make its fiction and encourages us to imagine a world with Black history at its center and to remember that slavery was not the beginning of Black history. My next book is called Tristan Strong, Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. Full disclosure, the cover art is done by an artist named Eric Wilkerson, who I know. He's a great guy. Tristan is a child having a really bad year. Devastated by losing his first boxing match and failing to live up to his family's boxing legacy, and then further traumatized by a bus crash that leaves his best friend dead and who he feels he failed to save, Tristan is sent to recuperate with his grandparents on their farm in Alabama. So going from Chicago to Alabama, basically the Great Migration in reverse, on his first night there, the 7th grader comes face to face with the infamous gum baby from Black American myth, who steals the last thing he has from his dead friend, a book of tales, and leads the child through a portal in a bottle tree to a world populated by the spirits and figures of African American legend. Think characters like John Henry, Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and others. The story follows Tristan as he discovers the power of a storyteller, and thus that he is touched by the power of Anansi the spider, who just happens to be the exact entity they need to save this world from the threat of an evil spirit known as a haint and find a way back home. Now, this book is too young for this talk's intended audience, but I'm encouraging people to read it anyway, especially if you've got young people to read it to or with. And if you or they liked kind of the Percy Jackson books or things like that, this is from Rick Riordan's imprint, so it's playing in the same space. It deals with themes of the power of storytelling, history, and heritage, things that are deeply kind of rooted in African-American life. And it shows how powerful a thing people's folklore can be. Third up is a classic, which some of you may have seen the movie of, but in case you haven't, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Set in Eatonville, Florida in the early 1900s, the story of a woman named Janie as she recounts her complex life story to her best friend Phoebe, who's the only one who actually asked her what happened rather than making assumptions after she returns to the town after years of absence. We learn Janie's life began under the watchful eye of her grandmother, Nanny, who wants nothing more than for Janie to be safe from the kind of sexual and gendered violence she and Janie's mother endured, and have the comfort that slavery denied, specifically Nanny. She sets Janie up with a wealthy older man in a loveless but secure marriage to accomplish this, but Janie's got her own mind and desires and eventually finds her own path in her own way. Leads her to a new husband, a younger man with charisma and ambition to spare, that sees her well off for a time, but she discovers he's using her mostly as a prop for his dreams. And eventually she finds an incredible love that ends in tragedy, that only life she's led up to that point would allow her to survive. This is the kind of tale that'll be appreciated by folks who understand the unpredictability of life, as well as a complex story of adventure, romance, and tragedy. You might even recognize, maybe not people you know, but people your parents or grandparents know, depending on how old you are. The book tackles themes of self-determination in the face of expectations and generational trauma. And in its use of language and choice of focus, Hurston defied a lot of criticism, even from other Black authors of her day, specifically by centering the language and vernacular she grew up hearing. My next one is the collected essays of James Baldwin. So this one isn't a narrative. We've got a nonfiction one this time. It is a collection of the thoughts and writings of, frankly, one of the most influential and prescient writers of the civil rights movement. The essays inside this book tackle what it means to be Black in the US, the realities of racism and the things he learned about how to understand it, white supremacy, his own position in the world as a Black man that he considered while living abroad in Europe, as well as calls and prescriptions for ending what he calls the US's racial nightmare. These are themes that run through his fiction work as well and can be helpful in getting a broader understanding of Baldwin as a writer. I think you'll enjoy this if you want to see an author of incredible wit and insight whose observations are still impressive and relevant more than 30 years after his death. You'll probably see things that modern contemporary Black writers are still talking about throughout Baldwin's work. They're still very resonant, and his observations remind us, how far we still have to go, considering how applicable everything he talks about still is. Additionally, Baldwin's stories tackle a lot of themes of masculinity, identity, and class in ways that are directly tied to his experiences as an LGBTQ man living in that time. Fun fact, again, Baldwin passed away only 2 years before I was born in 1987. He was also a friend of Maya Angelou. There's a whole bunch of contemporary Black authors that, if you look at their lifespans, overlap in ways you probably didn't recognize. My 5th book is The Gilda Stories by Jewel Gomez. This is probably one of my favorite ones that I've been reading recently. Beginning in 1850 with a character known only as the Girl, a Black child who escaped enslavement and is hiding out in a secluded farmhouse. She's found by a slave catcher and kills him in self-defense with a hidden knife, only to then be rescued by a strange woman named Gilda. Taken in as family, the girl finds joy and companionship for a time with Gilda in the business she runs and is educated by her house manager and partner, Bird, a Native American woman. Eventually, the nature of the pair as vampires is revealed, as the fact that Gilda is tired of living. She leaves her and the little girl in Bird's care, and hoping the two together will be able to handle mourning her and deal with the inevitable loneliness of eternity. In the process, she changes the girl and gifts the child her name, Gilda. The book follows this Gilda over the course of 200 years as she strives to survive, live ethically as a vampire, and by the rule, we take blood, never life, and we always leave something in exchange, even if others don't operate in the same way. This will be a thing you enjoy, as I did, if you like unique takes on vampires, especially if they ones that center women in their relationships, both platonic and romantic, as well as with power and each other. The central themes of community and ethics come through very strongly in the book, as well as what it means to be powerful and responsible when you have the ability to impact others. It deals again with the ideas of freedom and what it means to define your own path that are represented in a lot of the books talked about today. There's also community and collectivism themes, found family as well. These are very strong. Selfishness is a great sin among the vampire heroes in this story. And the narrative is pretty harsh about it. Something I find really fun about this one, Gomez cites the work of Octavia Butler as an inspiration for reminding her that Black people, especially Black women, belong in fantasy and speculative fiction. Funny enough, before her death, Butler would write her own vampire story and play with very similar themes. And I kind of wonder if the inspiration went back and forth here. Our last one for me coming up is The House of Cotton by Monica Bashirs. 19, broke, and about as close to an orphan as you can get without being officially there, the protagonist of this book, Magnolia, doesn't have a lot to look forward to. But then she's approached by a strange man named Cotton and offered a lucrative modeling job. And Magnolia thinks this could be the answer to her problems. But if alarm bells aren't going off in your heads reading this, you clearly haven't read the news or watched the news at all. The requests eventually start getting weird, and Magnolia starts to think she might be in over her head. This is described as a thriller. It's clearly angling for some modern horror mystery vibes, maybe even a little bit of magical realism, not sure. This might appeal to folks if you like psychological thrillers and that sort of thing. This looks to me like it's going to be a commentary on what it means both now and historically to be Black and a woman in the Deep South. The author is from Tennessee, probably seen a little bit about that herself. And frankly, anytime you see a story with flower naming, Black woman, and a character named Cotton, things are probably going to get dark, and you can tell. The book's going to release on April 4th, and while it's out of my usual reading zone, this is one I'm probably going to be picking up. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Helena to go ahead and close us out today.
Sorry for the delay. Thank you, Aaron. My books that I've selected are books, I guess, dealing with the pandemic of loss, grief, forgiveness. The first book, Miss Pearlie's Girls, is fiction. The rest of the books are biography, nonfiction, but basically trying to give some hopefulness and inspiration to everyone who's been locked down and lost personal family and friends, I'd say since the pandemic. Okay. So my first book, Miss Pearlie's Girls by Rashonda Tate Billingsley. Billingsley is a #1 national best-selling author and gets to the heart of loss, love, and betrayal in her latest novel, Miss Pearlie's Girls. The girls are brought back together when Miss Pearlie suddenly needs all of them home. Maxine, Stella, Star, and Leslie must cast aside their hatred for each other to honor their mother's last wish to see her daughters reconciled and reunited once more. No more secrets, no more hatred. They are all caught off guard when long buried secrets lead to forgiveness and powerful friendships. I enjoy this well-written and entertaining story. Billingsley is a great storyteller Each of Miss Pearlie's daughters had a lot of healing to do. The book deals with many heavy topics such as sexual assault, colorism, homophobia, fat phobia, intellectual insecurity, loneliness, empty nest syndrome, and the many shades of motherhood. This book is very believable and the characters are relatable. I strongly believe a film adaptation of Miss Pearlie's Girls will be fantastic. My second book is Divine Disruption by Dr. Tony Evans and his children. And this biblical and conversational book by Dr. Tony Evans and 4 adult children, Crystal Evans Hurst, Priscilla Shire, Anthony Evans, and Jonathan Evans. You will read 5 insightful perspectives on what it means to hold on to faith when life breaks your heart. We have all been through difficult seasons and times in life when it seems like the hits keep coming and you can barely catch your breath. The Evans family knows what it's like, and they've experienced the deep grief of losing 8 loved ones in less than 2 years' time, including the devastating passing of Lois Evans, the matriarch of the family. Divine Disruption, Holding On to Faith When Life Breaks Your Heart, is one of the most helpful books on grief. This book is written by Dr. Evans' family and was motivated by his wife. I recommend reading this book. It is a relevant work of nonfiction. Anyone who has wrestled with loss will appreciate this message of hope. I don't know if you're familiar with the Evans family, but all of them are very popular. Several have different books. This Divine Disruption is the first book that they put together as a family. And as it mentions, it talks about 8 different close family members within 2 years passed. And I particularly liked it because I had a brother and my mother who died really quick behind each other. And, you know, my uncle, and I was at that state where I was like, what's going on here? You know, it's like, but as they write in this book, you know, you just have to be faithful and trust that you're going to make it through to the next day. The third book is from Timby Locke, the book From Scratch, which currently it's been adapted into a Netflix series. And I really enjoyed this book because it also deals with death, but it also has romance in it. And it talks about her life with, you know, this is the love of her life, and he's dying from cancer. And is a different kind of love, but my brother passed away at 58 from cancer. And so for me, it's like, you know, seeing how other people, is like the person is gone, you love that person, you're still thinking about that person, but how do you continue to move on? You know, you're still living. There's still a purpose for you. You have to move on. And so for her, it was difficult, but she, you know, had a daughter, and she was the mom, and she knew that, you know, she couldn't just lay in her bed 24/7 and not do anything. So anyway, Timby Locke is an American actress who has appeared in television shows and film. She is best known as Dr. Grace Monroe on sci-fi series Eureka, and as Dr. Diana Davis in Sliders. Locke is also the author of the best-selling memoir From Scratch, which was later adapted into a limited series by Netflix. Locke tells the story of how she pieced her life back together after losing her husband, Sorrow, to cancer. The book is also a celebration of their love story. Timby and her sister Attica is also an author, and she's written several books. They are writers and showrunners and producers on the show. From scratch, tell the story how Timby fell in love at first sight with Sorrow, a professional chef on a street in Florence, Italy, how his traditional Sicilian family disapproved of his marriage to Timby, an African-American woman and actress, how the couple and family reconciled just as cancer strikes Sorrow, how Timby cares for Sorrow through his illness, and then how she and the daughter adopted by her and Sorrow join to Sicily and spend time with each family after his death. This is an emotional story, but very timely if you're learning how to adjust to the loss of a loved one. I highly recommend reading this book because it also deals with his side of family who really rejected her, but when they were dealing with his, cancer, and they would come back to his home, and how I guess the barriers sort of were broken just by being able to have the intimacy with getting to know each other, and the family seeing how much she loved him by how well she was taking care of him during his illness. The fourth book is Dancing in the Darkness by Reverend Otis Moss III. His father, Otis Moss Jr., was an affiliate of Martin Luther King Jr., working together in the Southern Leadership Conference and serving in 1971 as co-pastor with his father, Martin Luther King Sr., at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Reverend Otis Moss III, senior pastor at Chicago's Trinity United Church of Christ, and one of the country's most renowned and beloved spiritual and civil rights leaders. Reverend Moss relates the challenges of 2023 in his book, Dancing in the Darkness, drawing on the teachings of Dr. King, Howard Thurman, sacred scripture, Southern wisdom, global spiritual traditions, Black culture, and his own personal experiences. Dr. Moss instructs you on how to practice spiritual resistance by combining justice and love. This collection helps us tap the spiritual reserves we all possess, but too often overlook, so we can slay our personal demons, confront our civic challenges, and reach our highest goals. There was a point where he was getting threats, like death threats, and he saw his wife had said there was a noise, and he got a bat and he was gonna go, I guess, confront whoever he thought it was in the house, and it was his daughter in the dark, just spinning around, dancing, having a good time. And for him, it was like the light bulb going off, like you still, like a child, you still enjoy, like you're not really thinking about all the dangers that could happen to you. You're just having fun. So for him, by seeing this through his daughter, it was like it sort of helped him to see some light, in the darkness. And it talks about the things that are done with, evil intent, but there still needs to be light, and people still have to share love, instead of, thinking vengeance or whatever. But anyways, very good read. Another nonfiction, but especially, helping with loss and scripture to bring light to whatever things may have happened in your life. Okay, number 5 is Michelle Obama. Okay, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama is an American attorney and author who served as the First Lady of the United States from 2009 to 2017. As wife of President Barack Obama, she was the first African-American woman to serve in this position. Former First Lady Michelle Obama book, The Light We Carry, Overcoming in Uncertain Times. Generationally shifts are a theme throughout her book. Obama uses her own lived experiences to answer questions many people ask about life, whether it's the pandemic, racial injustice, or economic uncertainty. Obama said the past few years have been a collective struggle for many. She shares her philosophy around marriage, parenting, and partnerships. Drawing from her experience as a mother, daughter, spouse, friend, and first lady, she shares the habits and principles she has developed to successfully adapt to change and overcome various obstacles. Obama's book is very inspirational, and I loved it. She shares in her book basically relationships with younger generation, and even though you might be overwhelmed and it might seem too complicated, you know, to challenge, say, some hurdles in your life, but you know, she just start, just get started. If you have a passion or desire for whatever it is, you know, go ahead and start small, and next thing you know, you'll be doing something great and wonderful. Just don't give up. My last book is Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead. I'm looking forward to reading my 6th book. It's scheduled for release on July 18th. There are many sides to Whitehead's writing. He is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner for his novels, The Underground Railroad and The Nickel Boys. He also wrote a crime novel called Harlem Shuffle, set in Harlem between 1959 and 1964. The main character, Ray Carney, owns a furniture store on 125th Street in Harlem, but he has a sideline trafficking stolen goods as a fence. He prefers not to think of himself like his father, who was a full-time crook with crooked friends. The novel is about Ray's dual life, class divisions within Harlem, and the crimes of the elite compared to crimes on Ray's level. His new book is called Crook Manifesto. It takes place in Harlem in the 1970s, and it's about a retired criminal and furniture store owner, Ray Carney, who, you know, for a couple of reasons, has to unretire from crime. This book is actually a sequel to Harlem Shuffle. Like most of Whitehead's work, that book got a lot of praise when it came out, and my book club enjoyed reading it. So I'm hoping Crook Manifesto lives up to his fans' expectations. That's it for me. Thank you. And next, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Helena, and all the rest of the presenters. Yeah, you did a really great job. If any of you have any questions, we're going to have a short Q&A session. So be sure to enter your questions into the chat and we'll see if we can answer them. But before we get to that, I just want to highlight a few services and some programs that are coming up. So we got a lot of great recommendations this evening, but if you would like more recommendations, you should try out our personalized reading service. There is a form on our website under the Books, E-Media, and More tab where you fill out a form and with your likes and dislikes, and you will receive a list of 5 titles that we've created just for you. So yeah, try that service out. And then we have a couple of really great programs coming up in March. So this is Black History Month for like 2 more days, but starting later this week, it is Women's History Month. So we do have a program coming up called What Would She Read? That's really cool. Basically, the presenters are each going to pick an important woman from history, talk about something that she wrote or that was written about her, and then some books that we think that she would read if she were still alive today. So that should be a fun one. And then we are participating in a community-wide celebration of the St. Louis Literary Award winner, Neil Gaiman, in the next couple of months. So we do have a program coming up called If You Love Neil Gaiman, where we'll be talking about some of our favorite Neil Gaiman books and some read-alikes for them. And that program is open to both adults and teens, the Neil Gaiman one. So we hope that we will see you at those. And yeah, it's time for questions. So I'm gonna stop sharing my slides and put us into gallery mode again. Yeah, gallery. Okay. Well, thank you, all of you. You had several of you had books that I myself really like too. Uh, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev was my favorite book last year. It is so good.
So good.
So it's and like you said, it just feels so realistic. Like you think like this has to be like I want to go buy their album, but you can't because they're
I like read like a review after I wrote my blurb. It was like from NPR, and the person who wrote it said the exact same thing about having to like check if it was fiction or not. And I was like, okay, this is like the same thought. This is so good.
yeah.
Fun fact. I actually, when I was working on a Black Authors display for Black History Month, came across this in our catalog and almost requested it for myself if I didn't have 3 other things in front of it in my list.
You should read it. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's
I probably
good.
still will.
It's
And-
good.
And
Listen to it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's good.
Yoli's right. You should listen to it on audio because the full cast recording, it literally sounds like you're listening to like some sort of podcast or like it's very cool. We also have that title as a book discussion kit. So if anyone out there, you know, wants to discuss this with their book group, we do carry it as a book discussion kit. So anyway, I like that book a lot. And yeah, several of you had other books that I like a lot as well. So good picks. Let's see. Do we have any questions in the chat? Let's see here. Yeah, so we have one question about some new authors. Do any of you have any kind of brand new authors that are on your radar that you might want to highlight?
I do. I just read everybody's reading it. The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. She wrote The Yellow Wife, or well, not yellow, just Yellow Wife. So The House of Eve is on all the book clubs now, and everybody's reading that one. That one was good too. I didn't add it to this list. I thought about taking something out, adding it, but yeah, it's the hottest thing now that everybody's reading. So yeah, so that's a good one. And Moonrise Over New Jessup by Minix, I think is her last name, but everybody's reading that one too.
And I will say this about new authors too. The library just got a TikTok. I feel a little old for TikTok, but anyway, the library just got a TikTok channel, a TikTok account. And I did pull together some books for Black History Month. They did like a bit of a shuffle TikTok where they went through some books, and they were all like brand new stuff by kind of new Black authors. So if you're on TikTok, you can follow the library and you'll see that one. Yeah, let's see here. Any other questions?
I will also say that Monica Brashears, who I mentioned as my pick, I believe this is her first major published novel. So I do believe she qualifies as new. So when April 4th rolls around, picking up The House of Cotton is probably not a bad use of your time if you want to get her stuff read.
Cool.
The person, I think her name, Clayton, I saw Clayton. I think her question is, like, if her as a new author, like, how would she get like in the lineup for, I guess, her book being read? And usually I tell people that the library should have your book, and you do that by having all your friends request it. Have every friend that you know, church member, whatever. So you have like 100 people making this request for your book. It's like, what book is this? Oh, let's see how we can get it.
Yeah, we do buy local and new authors. Part of our collection development policy is about supporting sort of local authors and local interests. So yeah, so you can have people suggest a purchase for your book at the library. Also, I mean, I just brought up TikTok, but a lot of authors these days get on the TikTok because there's like a whole community of readers called Book Talk, where you talk about your book and you can get your book out there for a lot of people to see. So, all right, let's see. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks. Are any of you reading anything good right now? It doesn't necessarily have to be related to the theme, but anything that you're reading.
I hate to keep saying this, but I was on Instagram and I got this book off Instagram. It was published in 2008. It's called Like Trees Walking by Ravi Howard. It tells the story of a lynching in Mobile, Alabama in 1981. And it tells it from the point of the funeral home. It's from that family's point of view, the family who owns the funeral home, who has to, take care of the body of the person who was lynched. So when I tell you, it's a good one. It's a good one. I didn't put it on this list because the library doesn't have a copy because it's from 2008. But it's on Libby. But I'm reading it on Libby. But it's good. It's worth it. It's good. It might be my second book favorite of the year when I finish it. It's good.
So
that is a good tip, that sometimes we may not carry a physical print copy anymore, but we might have it in e-media. So if you're open to e-media, sometimes that gets you some older titles. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
yeah. As far as what I'm reading right now, I actually decided to take kind of my thought that I had at the end of my notes on the Gilda stories and check out Octavia Butler's vampire story, Fledgling. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Fledgling. And it's good, but it is, for something that's written as simply on purpose as it is, there's some heavy things in here that are designed to make you ask some questions, and Butler doesn't give you any answers to them. She just expects you to sit with those questions and figure it out. So I'm about midway through, getting closer to the end, and it's like the book's genre almost seems to be changing as I get close to the end, which is also kind of a fascinating thing I haven't seen much of. But no, it's something else.
Just real quick, I host a virtual book club every first Monday at 7 p.m. It's called the Social Justice Book Club, and since March is Women's History Month, I'm currently reading Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, who's also she calls herself Japanese. It's such a weird thing to say, but it's like her and make like one other person, a duo, Japanese breakfast, really good music. But it's a really good book. It's kind of like a meditation on loss and just how she connects with her mother and her Korean heritage after her mother's death from cancer, and just how food allows her to connect and kind of deal with the loss of her mother. And it's a really good book. And yeah, every Monday, every first Monday of the month, 7 p.m. Social Justice Book Club.
I read her book, and she was saying that the food was the thing that brought joy between the two of them. They really didn't, this what they call it, that yin and yang or whatever. They really didn't mix well, but then she kept trying to think. She said, but there were happy times, and then she remembered it was the food. Whenever they were preparing something together, whenever they were even in the store. That's why the name of the book is about H Mart, because it's like that was their connection.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, one of our viewers in the chat has said that they are reading Soul Food: The Surprising Story of an American Cuisine, One Plate at a Time by Adrienne Miller, and they said it's really good. So, so thank you for that suggestion from in the chat. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, and we're coming up on 8 o'clock. So yeah, I want to thank all of you for presenting tonight, and I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us tonight, and hope that you all have had a joyful and entertaining and as well as enlightening Black History Month, and that you're gearing up for Women's History Month, because we have some really great programs coming up next month as well. So Thank you to all of you. And
Okay.
yeah, we'll see you
Thank you.
next time. Bye-bye.
One
All
other
right,
time.
thank you. Bye.